Well, welcome to the first day of December 2021. It's a Wednesday night. It's 8 o'clock in London, and my name is Gary with the Gary's Glorious Golden Nuggets. And this is Golden Nugget Nation Q&A. And I am happy and grateful for those of you who followed this and receive benefit from the answers that I provide. The question I have this week that came forward is, I have a business, Gary, and I'm not doing very well. I don't seem to be making any progress. And so I just wonder, can you help me understand, based on basic economics, where I'm going wrong? It was a very interesting question. It wasn't very clear, it wasn't very precise, and I'm going to do my very best to try to give you a ballpark answer, if you will allow that, which means it's going to be wide in scope and it's going to be perhaps a little bit academic, as I tend sometimes to be. But I want us to go back to the individual who became known as the father of capitalism. He was the first person who kind of coined the idea of a free enterprise system. His name is Adam Smith. He lived in the 1700s. Adam Smith was a scholar from Scotland who had actually taught at Oxford University, and he was also with the University of Glasgow at one point. He toured Europe extensively for a 3-year period, being a tutor for a very wealthy man's children. And upon his return, after being able to talk to all kinds of people about various economic theories and what was going on, now he viewed economics from the vantage point of being a moral philosopher. That was what he actually did. He wrote 2 books in his life. The one that gave him a lot of critical acclaim in his lifetime was The Theory of Moral Sentiment, which is his moral philosophy aspects. But he wrote a second book that he completed 10 years after his returning to Scotland from taking these, being a mentor for 3 years, walking around Europe, talking to various people, crown heads, government officials, wealthy landowners, etc. And he came up with an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Now, what was interesting is, like 200 years prior to Adam Smith, the economic system was based on mercantilism, which was basically you only have wealth if you hold gold or silver, if you are government, if you are involved with government, either being a supplier of goods and services to the government, or you're rendering goods and services that are endorsed by the government. This is why you had a lot of the people like Christopher Columbus, who went to Spain to get Spain to fund his expedition to America for the discovery, because the idea was to go to India, but to go a different direction, with the idea that if the earth is truly round, then we'll end up in India by going this opposite direction as opposed to going around Africa. And so this is the world that he was looking at. And as he toured Europe, he was talking to landowners, and but why do you own this land? Because I received a land grant from the king. And he started looking at this and said, yeah, you're the wealthy people, but that isn't really the wealth. And when he was going through France, he ran into a group of people who were called the physiocrats. And the physiocrats had this idea that was like everything's laissez-faire. You let things flow in a natural way, but the wealth is not in who holds the gold, who holds the silver. It's who holds the land, and what the land is producing for the people is a way that wealth is being generated within any country. While as a moral philosopher and as a budding economicist, that held some interest for Adam Smith. Adam Smith came up with some more concepts, and one of the concepts he had was, you know, there is a moral imperative in human beings to want to do better, to want to have more, to want to create. And none of these economic systems actually kind of goes in that. It's always like we're going to somebody else for something. Oh, we're going for something else, to land and to do agriculture and the farm, which people have done for, thousands of years. But even though we've done it for thousands of years, the vast majority of people have no wealth. And he was looking at, what actually makes a country or a nation or a group of people wealthy, as opposed to just the leaders. And he came up with this concept that was basically this free enterprise system, where you get an idea, buggy whips, for example, and you figure out a way to make a very good buggy whip, and you sell the buggy whip, and then you get supplies and you make another buggy whip. But that's a very poor way to go and develop things, because maybe you can make a buggy whip every day and sell it at the end of the day. You really haven't made much money. But what happens if you're able to get a cow, your own cow, and you go to butcher it, but now you have enough materials to make 15 buggy whips. And let's say that you bring in a few friends to help you braid the buggy whips, to get them onto a pole of some sort, to an integral weaving of the materials so it feels really nice in the hands, etc. And let's say that you're able to create from the raw resources that you have, from trees that grow on your property and the cow that you have slaughtered and the hide from it, you're able to generate 50 buggy whips. And with the help of your 3 or 4 friends, you're able to manufacture them in 5 days. And you can go to the market on Saturday and sell them all at once, which leaves you free to go make more. And what you end up doing is you end up buying more materials, you end up hiring more people to come in and work, and you're paying them a wage. And people would say, well, yeah, but don't you exploit people by doing that, by having them come work for you? Because how are you going to keep them wanting to invest their time? I mean, we have slavery, we have these kind of services that are going on right now. And Adam Smith was he found slavery abhorrent, number one. I mean, just as an academic, he felt slavery was a very impoverishing system. But the other aspect that came out of it, he said, is there's a moral invisible hand that keeps you from doing things like that. Because in his view of economics is there's competition. Competition keeps you honest. Competition keeps you from charging too high, because when you start to sell your product for too much money, somebody else will have just a good quality product and they're selling it for less. And by doing this, you have put yourself out of competition, because the competition has taken over in this certain slot. Now, how do we get around this? Well, let's just say that you're going to a certain market and buying cattle that are being slaughtered at some abattoir someplace, and you're buying the hides. Suddenly somebody else wants to come in and buy those hides. You're now in competition for the raw materials in order to make the product. So you've got to figure out a way to buy them in such quantity that they are you're buying them more cheaply through quantity. You also have to make sure you have enough manpower that you can put them out and then get them distributed to the various markets in the area so that they're being sold, that money's coming in so you can pay your employees. You need to pay your employees enough that they're not going to go to some competing company to go work for them because they're willing to pay more. And he just kind of viewed this as this was an invisible hand that was going to lead people into being more moral. And as he investigated this, and as people started to employ his economic principles, I believe in the book he talked about a company that was making pins, just little like needles. And what they would do, he was talking about, you get an iron bar and you give it to a blacksmith, he can make horseshoes for about 12 pounds or $12 a piece out of that chunk of metal. But if you break it down into pins, you can sell those pins for thousands of dollars from the same quantity of metal. And so he said, so as you develop the skills and the ability to make the pins and the needles, you need to make them at such a good quality that people are going to want your needles over somebody else's. You got to have a price where people are willing to pay for your needles that you want. Just the fact that you took a bar of metal and were able to make 30,000 needles, and with those 30,000 needles, you're now going to sell them at 10 cents a piece, which is going to make you a heck of a lot more money than if you just made 12 horseshoes out of the same piece of metal. What Adam Smith was pointing out is you're going to have more people invested in working with you. You're going to have people who are going to be making them. You're going to find the most efficient way to make those needles. You're going to find the most efficient way to get them distributed. You're going to find more shopkeepers who are willing to sell your needles at a price that they can also make a profit. And all of this is going to keep you in a moral component. But the other thing that he identified was as you become more profitable, as you become more wealthy, then your wealth spills over to other people because you now have the means to go buy goods and services from other locations. You have the ability to travel. Used to be people never left where they were born, never saw distant towns. Maybe they would hear stories about it from people who were traveling through, and they tell you what was behind them and what they were going to. But most people never left home. And now for the first time, you have the development. And what developed in the 1700s, 1800s? You've got the steam engine coming. You ended up getting trains being built. You had canals being built all over the world where people were being able to transport goods and services to people who were willing to pay for those goods and services. And as they paid for those goods and services, they often created the means to manufacture things on their own aspect. And this was the wealth of nations. And this is what allowed certain nations to become very, very wealthy in a rapid order, and why other nations, even today, are not very wealthy at all, because they haven't ever taken on to this philosophy, because they're always thinking that government is the solution. This was the downfall of communism in many people's viewpoint, was the fact that you had no need to dream for something bigger because the government already owned it. You would work to do whatever your job was within the government system because you were guaranteed a job. Most likely you'd never really get fired from the job. A lot of you know that I've been to the Ukraine many, many times, and people would tell me there's this old Soviet joke about they pretend they pay us, we pretend we work. And that was the downfall of the system. because nobody had an investment in it. What you have in free enterprise is you have employees who come in who become invested immediately. I need to provide a really good service to my employer so that I become valuable to the employer that they want to keep me. And I'm valuable because I make my employer more money. My employer makes more money, which means he pays more in taxes. My employer maybe pays for medical benefits for myself. My employer gives me so many weeks of holiday paid each year. They give me so many sick days off each year that I can accrue, or whatever the system is that you have involved. And so that allows people to start to develop their own wealth. Oftentimes there's, you're getting better at your job, so I pay you more because I want to keep you, because I don't want to lose you to my competition. And that allows the standard of living to be raised for everybody who's working for that individual. So now, having explained this basic outline of capitalism and Adam Smith's concept, I think people who sit back and say, look, I'm offering a good and service and I have no takers. Well, the first thing I sit down is, do you have credibility? Do people see you as a credible source of providing the good and service that you say you can provide? Because if people don't see that from you, why would they want to come to you to negotiate a price or to investigate further with what you have? Okay, do you have any track record? If you don't have a track record, that's not a problem. There's lots of people who've just started out today, but they are credible. They are credible. How do you build credibility? Well, you need to create some kind of authority that people will see or understand, whether that is you wrote a book, maybe in your past you worked for other credible people and now you've just broken free to do it yourself, and you can appeal to the fact that I spent years for this company and that company doing this service, and now I'm on my own. That's another way that you can establish the credibility. But what's credibility is not the issue. If you sit back and say, no, I'm credible, my services, well, we know that people want to do business with people that they know and they like. So how are you getting yourself known? How are you getting people to know that they like you? Well, we are blessed in some ways. I guess it's a curse as well, but there's social media. Social media is a way to get your personality out there, to let people know who you are, what you do, how you do it. When you do it with somebody else in the business that found you credible enough and they had successful results, you let those successful results be known so that other people will begin to buy in that maybe you can help me too. Sometimes it's pricing. You might be asking too much for what your credibility level is. It could also be maybe you're asking too little and you need to raise your price so people can say, yes, he's credible. Can you imagine, for example, that people, you built a car, let's say, this is a true story. There was a car that was built in the 90s that came out of Yugoslavia. It was called the Yugo. It was known to be the cheapest car in North America. And a lot of people went out and bought a Yugo, only to find out that that car was more in the shop than it was on the road. It just constantly was falling apart. It was of such very poor quality. Getting the parts in to repair a Yugo was a long wait. It was like you had a car, but you didn't really have a car anymore, and it had no resale value. So if you ever wanted to sell your Yugo for something else, people tried to trade them in and they wouldn't take them on the car lots. They just said, no, we're not going to take your Yugo. You're going to have to sell that yourself somewhere. We don't want it. So if you have no credibility, that's what you're going to be fighting with your whole time. If you have credibility, let's say I'm offering my service really cheap. People are wondering whether they're buying a Yugo. So raise your price and see if that changes things. Um, uh, Robert Caldini wrote a book called Influencing, and I was really blessed. I'm a graduate of Arizona State University, and I took a psychology class from Robert Caldini. And he talked about the art of influencing and the various principles involved. But the one story that really struck me the most from the lectures that he gave was the fact that when you say that a product is not selling, the first thing to do is to double the price and see what happens then. And then after you've doubled the price and you left it there for a couple of weeks and you haven't sold much, or you think, it's really way overpriced now, he says, then keep that price up, saying that you're offering a 50% discount. Now you're back to the original price, and people walking by on a psychological level will suddenly think, oh my goodness, this is a good price, especially if it's 50% of what that big price up there is all about. And he said it was amazing how much stuff flew off the shelves by just playing that little ploy. Raise the price. He talked to, one of the things that he did talk about was he worked in a store where there was a consignment of umbrellas that came in. It wasn't the rainy season. This is Arizona. There's no rainy season in many parts of the state. And this was actually in the summertime. Nobody uses umbrellas in the summertime, and the guy needed to sell the umbrellas. And so he was selling them for like $2 a piece. Nobody was buying them. And so what they put up was a sign that said rainy day sale. They put it up 400%. So now they're selling them for $8 each. Rainy day sale, just in case you have a rain. These umbrellas that normally would sell for, $20 in the rainy season, we're selling them for $8 today. He said they were gone in 40 hours. 1 week of 9 to 5 business hours, but he said it was basically 3 days. Every umbrella was gone, with people actually coming in and saying, do you got any more of those umbrellas for $8? They were absolutely stunned. They couldn't believe it. But just imagine 400% profit on top of what they were going for, which was $2, and nobody was buying. Nobody was taking it. See, it was too good of a deal. Must be something wrong with those umbrellas. They're too cheap. So they knew that the umbrella normally sold for 20, so they sold it for 8, and it just has a rainy day sale. And people came along and bought them out. So there's marketing. Are you marketing yourself well? Are you at a price point that people are willing to pay? I know there are times that you have probably even gone to Amazon and you've probably looked in for a generalized topic, and then you start looking at specifics, and then you find comparables that you want. You're looking for, okay, who's going to give me the cheapest deal? Where do I get the most out of my money for that one item? And sometimes it's not that much of a difference between what one item sells or another. And sometimes you're absolutely shocked. I got to tell you, I was looking for a selfie stick one time. There were selfie sticks that were, I swear, made by the exact same manufacturer that was being sold by different people, that were selling for 39 pounds and selling for $9.99. I could not see any difference, even in the ad itself. And, in that case, I'm just going to take the 9-pound selfie stick, because why should I pay 30 for the same thing? On the other hand, there have been times when I have sat down and I have said, well, I like this. and I like that, but I want this color, so I'll pay extra for the color. That's really what it boiled down to, is they were charging a little bit more for that color. People do that all the time. People, I remember at one point in my life where people were buying a car, and the man liked the color red. He wanted a red car, and the lot told him, well, you're paying $2,500 more for the red color versus the white color that's sitting out there. You didn't care. I want the red car. People will purchase what they want to purchase. You just got to make sure that you have your price set correctly. I think another thing is are you paying too much for your supply? Do you need to find better supply lines? Is there a delay in getting things so that you can continue on with the sale? Is the quality of your product of such a standard that people are going to be satisfied with it, or are you going to be selling Yugos and having everybody constantly complaining and unhappy, but you're not listening? You're not listening, and you keep selling the same poor quality until they no longer exist. You go bankrupt. So when you come to me and you say, well, my business isn't doing very well, is it you? Is it your personality? Is it your price? Is it your ability to deliver? Do you have some sense of moral authority that you can say, I can provide that? It's really up to you. I hope this has been helpful. I can strongly recommend book 4 of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. When you read that, you suddenly realize what the free enterprise system is and what the basis of capitalism is all about. Now, I know that capitalism has a literally bad name. There are people who have exploited other people in the name of capitalism. But if you read what Adam Smith is talking about, when he's talking about this moral compass that we have, this guiding hand, this invisible guiding hand that keeps us from doing what is wrong. I mean, it means you have a conscience. We know if we are taking advantage of somebody or if we're cheating them, and it will show up in our way of dealing with business. But when you're forthright, when you're honest, when you're trying to give a fair deal, when you're trying to make sure that everybody profits along the way, that you're not trying to steal from somebody else, that you have branded yourself well, that is when you're going to win in the game of economics and in whatever product or service you're going to provide. So I wish you well. I thank you all for coming in and listening to me this week, and we will catch you next Wednesday night, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the 8th of December. Okay. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant week.